quite nostalgic watching those wonderful scenes of Dushanbe and Tajikistan. I should say that I was actually in Tajikistan myself in 1989. I went back and forth until about 1992, but I was there during part of the war, and again, it's very gut-wrenching to see those awful scenes of the civil war and unrest in Dushanbe. And because I actually did I spent a lot of time up to Barzog, not far from Dushanbe, doing my field work. And again, it's very, very resonant, it brings back a lot of memories to me, so it's wonderful to see this. But anyway, I'll hand over to you to see how you would structure this.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I really want to thank Gillian for generously hosting this event here tonight. Also being, not only she has, hosted us, but also she has decided to invite everybody at the end of this event for dinner.
Absolutely, and I apologise profusely. I can't be at the dinner myself. I'm going to actually head off in about 20 minutes or so, because unfortunately we have another college dinner in the formal hall tonight, which I need to go along to. So I do apologise, but you're all very warmly welcomed into the dining room to have supper tonight and celebrate this.
But thank you so much, Gillian. Really, I can't thank enough. Thank you. Also, I would like to thank Salura Bristow for taking the time to come and say a few words. Also, thank you so much for everybody to come. And I would like to acknowledge a few colleagues here. Charles Melville, Persian Melville, thank you so much for coming. And also I have my friend John Casey from Keys College. And everybody, thank you so much. It's an honor to have the Osimi family tonight with us. And it's an honor to be able, for Mosaic, to be able to put this event together with Gillian here this evening. And also, it's an honor to have Chris and colleagues of Chris who made this lovely documentary. The format of this evening is that after the documentary we have great scholars and experts to say a few words about the ideas that we saw that Osimi had about the region, especially it's around the idea of integration, connectivity among diversity. And this is very much in resonance with the message of Mosaic. We are basically looking unity in Afghanistan and the region through acknowledgement of diversity rather than some models of nation state that have denied actually existence of diversity and putting the kind of emphasizing that some we should become some identities perhaps kind of was put in a more exalted position rather than others, and that means the denial of some of those, and it didn't work, and we know what happened. So the message of the documentary and the work of Osimi really resonates with our work, and that's really pleasure and honor to be able to hold this event. We have three scholars. Maybe I can introduce them in turn or at once, I don't know, but then they can say a few words. Dagiev is from the Institute of Ismaili Studies. He did his PhD on nationalisms of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and later on he went on to write some wonderful books. Especially, he has been working in the past 3 or 4 years on a mega project of bringing 48 scholars together to write a history of Tajiks, history, culture, and identity of Tajiks from 7 nation states in the region. It's from China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Iran, to write 2-century or over 2-century history of the Tajiks. And the book is now complete, and the University of Cambridge Press is looking at it, and it's in the peer review basically phase. And hopefully this year the book will be published. So that's Dagi.
Just following Professor Mohammad Osimi's step.
Yes. So with that, maybe you can start, and then we can go to other speakers. Yeah, is that all right? Yeah.
use them or just I should
You can
say
stand
a
up
few
or
words?
sit down, whatever.
I think sitting is better. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. And yes, one of the interesting things when Professor Richard Fry initially, by the end of the Soviet period, I think it was 99, he visited Tajikistan. He was known obviously as a professor of Iranian studies and he has done enormous work, but he was also very keen on Tajiks. But he visited Tajikistan and he was teaching for a couple of years at the Tajik National University. He wanted to write a history of Tajiks, but that was very...
Maybe people want to see your feet space, or I know that you're coffee there, that's good.
No. So he was quite fascinated, but at the same time he found it very challenging. Because modern Tajikistan, as was already mentioned during the film and by other speakers, it's a very mountainous region of what is modern Central Asia, and most of the historical and cultural centers are falling out of modern Tajikistan. So he does actually speak quite lengthy in the introduction that it's very difficult to write about the history of Tajiks, not sort of penetrating to other regions. But another challenge is usually when we see all these modern states like modern Central Asia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Afghanistan, Pakistan, their very existence is not even 100 years old. I mean, Afghanistan more or less 148 years, but the rest turning like 100, and Pakistan still younger. So the whole region before was known Khorasan historically. So, and most of these major cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, Khorasan, we have also Nishapur and Tuz, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khorasan within modern Uzbekistan, and then we have Mar in Turkmenistan, Tuz and Nishapur in modern Iran, Herat and Balkh and Kabul in Afghanistan, and so forth. So it's a very, very difficult for any probably historian or scholar to write about it. But if you just cross that border or just stepping out of, let's say, 100 years history, it would have been much easier. So this is also the message of Muhammad Osimi. He also felt the same, probably the same challenge, and by the end of the Soviet period, he saw it as an opportunity to sort of connecting wider picture of Central Asia or Khorasan, and that's why this book also was very important for him, bringing perspective from other modern nation states. So it was like in the mid of 19th century, a German traveler, I can't recall his name, I have it somewhere here. He was traveling in the region, and then he came up with this idea of Central Asia. Probably he didn't mean it in a current, he didn't mean it in this, like, including only 5 former Soviet Central Asian states, but Alexander von Humboldt. And, but he came up with this concept of Central Asia, and ever since, as a result of British and Russian colonial rivalries, also known as a Great Game, in modern Afghanistan was created as a buffer zone between these two empires, and then modern Central Asia fall within the influence of Russian Empire and the rest within India. But when you look at the map of like historical, like through historical sources and some other references in literature, the border of ancient Persia and India was Sindh Darya or Indus, which is literally cutting into pieces modern Pakistan. And western part, they're all ethnically Iranian-speaking people, Baluchis, Hunza, Gilgit, Chetrol, Swati, all the way to Kashmir. And similarly, we see on the part of China, the same kind of situation. This, it was called Eastern Turkestan, which was not probably also quite relevant at the time, but that part was also never part of China. And by the way, until 1936, it was actually a communist, independent state. It was neither part of the Soviet Union nor part of China. However, because the Soviet Union was supporting it quite well, and but in 1930s, when Hitler came to power and obviously this ideology, some scholars and experts argue that Stalin felt sooner or later there will be war, and he didn't want China to step from back, so they had to give up on the Eastern Turkestan part, which is now part of China. Western part of China, yeah. So, yeah, this is like briefly about this idea which Muhammad Osimi was also fighting for, and he was bringing scholars and these 6 amazing collection of articles by scholars and experts to reflect on the culture and tradition of people, and he also saw it as an opportunity in post-Soviet to combine these forces and bringing and presenting better probably the mosaic of all these ethnic diverse communities. And here we are now. So I think I will just thank
you, Dagiev, for that wonderful reflections. The next speaker, we would like Dr. Yahia Baiza of the Ismaili Studies Institute. I think he's talking about cultural pluralism, which is very relevant to the topic of tonight. Dr. Yahia Baiza did his PhD in Oxford, and he is an expert of history of education in Afghanistan. He has written a wonderful book, which is a reference book on the history of education in the country from 1901 to 1912. And very recently I had the pleasure of reading the book, which was amazing, and I learned so much from the book, and we have been discussing back and forth after each chapter with Dr. Baiza. And also he's not only an academic, but also a practitioner fighting for social justice in Afghanistan. He is at the forefront of the Hazara APPG in the parliament, as well as he's the head of the National Congress of Hazaras as well. So he's trying to not only produce knowledge, but also try to work for betterment of his country as well. So thank you so much for being here with us, and we'd like to hear.
Thank you very much, Zalmai, and first of all, congratulations to Shura and his team, and for producing this amazing documentary, and it's an honor to be here today, and thank you for hosting this event here at King's College, and I'm sure that the children of Mr. Dr. Osimi is proud of what has been his legacy, and yesterday we had the honor of hosting this event at the Al-Ahmad Center in London. When I was thinking to write something or to speak something about today's event in relation to Osimi's work, to be honest, I had a very difficult time what topic to choose, because I didn't study Mr. Osimi's life and legacy as part of my scholarly work so far, but he was nevertheless known to us in Afghanistan when we do research on Afghanistan studies. But I had a difficulty because I wanted to choose a topic that would not only connect with his legacy and activities, but also with the region as well, which was so dear to him as well. And given his activities and work in bringing kind of promoting pluralism and diversity, or as Zalmai said, unity and diversity. So I was trying to select a topic that would be fitting for this evening's event. And then I thought that perhaps language, the Persian language would be, to some degree, would do justice to Osimi's work and activities, and given that his foundation of Taiwan as well. And Persian language is something that is also very closely connected to the identity of Tajikistan and the region as well. And what I'm saying today is not from an expert on the Persian language itself, but more of a kind of reflection on how Persian language has become kind of a contested terrain in the region, that on the one hand it binds and connects the region, but on the other hand the so-called, you can call it Persian phobia or anti-Persian movements that has been in the region, in Tajikistan during the time of the Soviet Union, in Uzbekistan for many other reasons, as well as in Afghanistan. So what I will talk about today is kind of a reflection in which and through which also I hope that somehow I will be able to reflect on the activities and the legacy of Osimi himself as well. And, as all we know, Persian language has been kind of a supra-entity element in the region, one thing that would unite diverse communities in Central Asia, especially like, for example, Afghanistan, that we have Pashtuns, Uzbeks, Turkmen, Hazaras, Baluch, Pashtun, Nuristan, you name it, and also in Transmoxania, in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Samarkand, Bukhara, Tashkent, Iran, and also in India during the end of Mughal Empire before Britain came into the region. So Persian language was not only the lingua franca, but the language of literature, the core, but also a supra-ethnic, kind of religious and ethnic element that everybody was, in a way, every ethnicity group was seeing the history, the cultural activities in it. So for that reason, I think that talking about a little bit about the life of the Persian language itself would be interesting to connect it to Tajikistan as well as to the activities of Osimi himself. When we talk about Tajikistan, I mean, Tajikistan was a country that was created after the Tsarist Russia occupied the region, and until 1920s, the language common in Transmoxania, Afghanistan, Iran was known as Persian. But then in the 1920s and 1928, Soviets renamed Persian as Tajik. By naming this as Tajik, what happened that we are encountering a kind of an invention of a language, because in the history before the occupation of Tajikistan by the Soviet Union, we don't have the name Tajiki or Tajik as a language, because all it was known was Farsi or Farsi version. So Tajiki became a kind of an invented language for the people of Tajikistan, and with that, the Tajik identity and Tajikistan initially also was kind of an entity within the bigger Uzbek area, and Uzbek itself and the Uzbek language itself was also kind of an invented language, you could also say, because it was more like an Eastern Turkestan, which had a lot of elements and influence from Persian itself. So now here we see that there is a Persian phobia kind of movements under the Soviet occupation in order to create a new identity for Tajikistan, and also when Tajikistan in the 1928 almost became an independent country and state, Tajikistan did not receive the Persian-speaking cities of Bukhara and Samarkand, which was the most historical and culturally and civilization most important cities. Rather, it got Dushanbe. And Dushanbe was very small, like call it maybe village or town.
It was a village.
Yes, and Dushanbe. And so really, Dushanbe was not a city to be capital city for a nation that was claiming to have Persian as its language, and a language that is so deeply rooted in the civilization, especially in after the rise of Islam in the region. So one of the things that in the film is also was a reflection of Osimi's kind of life and work, that he goes to Moscow and he tries to convince Tajik scholars, students who studied in Moscow and St. Petersburg, perhaps in other cities, Leningrad, yes. So he was trying to bring them to Dushanbe. Now, if I think, now imagine that at that time, somebody studies or finished studies in Moscow, to come back to Dushanbe. I mean, what would be kind of attraction, or what would be the magnet there? So really, there was not much like in Dushanbe. So that was, but what Osimi wanted is to build now this new state, this new nation. Of course, by the time of Osimi, Tajikistan was already as a state, but still it needed intellectuals, it needed kind of repatriation, or repatriates from Moscow, from Leningrad, to come back to Tajikistan. So do you see how much here is a cultural struggle, how much is here is a kind of Osimi is seeing the kind of intellectual poverty in the capital city, in Dushanbe, and he sees here and there some lights that can come back to Tajikistan and to push forward the kind of agenda, the program that he had in mind. However, now the Soviet Union obviously did not favor for Persian to be the name of the language for Tajikistan, but rather become a Tajik language. Now, initially in the early 1920s, the language became Latin, and then later became Cyrillic with Sadruddin Aini, who himself never wrote in Cyrillic, but he decided or somehow was influential in that matter. And now when we do fast forward after the independence, for the first time Persian becomes kind of in the constitution or in the language law, whatever it is exactly called. So it became a term for which in a language that the state would replace Russian with Persian. And also there was a hope and talk about Persian, Arabic Persian alphabet as well. So this is in the early 1990s, and one can imagine that despite the fact that there was poverty, despite the fact that there was civil war, but there's so much hope and energy that language itself gave to people. However, it did not materialize. Now I was reflecting on this, that it did not materialize, why it did not materialize. So maybe we don't read it much in the literature, but if we a little bit go deep beyond that, perhaps we can come to some kind of clues that I would leave to students or perhaps scholars in this area to explore. But from my perspective, one was that when the former communist members, party members, they gained the power rather than the opposition, and they needed the support of Moscow on the one hand, and the support of Uzbekistan. So I think here Moscow and Uzbekistan played an important role in putting this Persian language off the table. Because when we look at the Uzbekistan itself in the 1930s, 40s, they suppressed the Persian language and Persian identity, especially in Samarkand and Bukhara, to the extent that the statistical figures in Uzbekistan would not allow people to identify themselves as Persian speaking, let alone calling themselves like Persian. So for that reason, in Uzbekistan, for their own political reason, to suppress Persian language and identity, and Tajikistan needed for its, perhaps for its survival, I don't know, for its geopolitical survival, or the politicians from the Communist Party, they needed for their own survival, they needed the support of Uzbekistan and Moscow, and both were not favoring Persian language. So that I leave for students and scholars to explore that and to see how that had a role to play. But now moving towards this side of the river valley to Afghanistan. And so here we have a similar anti-Persian movements, and I wrote it extensively in my book, Zalmai referred to it. The language policy of the Pashtun amirs and kings and presidents was quite anti-Persian in Afghanistan. In a kind of it mirrored what happened in Uzbekistan in 1937. And initially Mahmud Tarzi, who was kind of known as the father of journalism in Afghanistan, those who are familiar with Afghanistan history, he wrote it very clearly that we have to do away with Persian and replace it with Pashtun. And Pashtun was a language like many other ethnic communities, like a tribal or an ethnic language. It was not a language of code or language of literature. I do not deny Persian and Pashtun literature. There were Pashtun literature, but not to the extent of Persian. So that the idea came from Mahmud Tarzi, but it was intended, it gained further momentum when Musahiban or Nader Shah's, when Nader Shah came to power, and his brothers, and Shah Mahmud and Shah Wali and Zahir Shah. So they made the Pashtunization of Afghanistan state agenda. In 1937, the government announced it publicly that a lot of investment will be made to make Pashtun the official language of Afghanistan. For 10 years, from 1938 to 1948, all books and schools had to teach in Pashtun. At a time when there was no Pashtun books enough, that Pashtun was not even the kind of a second language, there was no experience of it, and there were not even Pashtun teachers to teach Pashtun. Now imagine somebody in Badakhshan of Afghanistan would learn Pashtun words, for example, as, which means like, for example, horse, and then would be translated into asp, which is again Persian word, and from asp would be translated further into the local Shugni or Roshani or Zubati languages. So that was a disaster in Afghanistan with this Pashtunization of language. And King Zahir Shah issued a farman, an edict that all government employees, civil servant employees, have to learn Pashtun within 3 years' time. So it was not obviously possible. It never became a successful project. Now imagine that somebody in Afghanistan's office, for example, somebody would write in Farsi, in Persian, would send a letter to me as a translator. I would translate it into Pashtun, and it would be handed over to another person who would be Pashtun speaker. Although the Pashtun speaker knew Persian as well, but then he would write it in Pashtun, and it would come to me, I would translate it, and I would give it back to Persian speaker. So an absolute disaster, and it was only when Afghanistan joined the United Nations in 1948 that this language policy stopped. But what the government did, it renamed Persian as Dari, in a way that to say that it is different from Tajik and different from Iranian Persian. So we see that here, that how language becomes a political tool for political ideology. And at the same time, it is interesting to note that Tajiks with their Tajiki language, Afghanistan with their Dari language, and in Iran with their Persian language, they all understand and communicate with each other. without a problem. So here is that what I meant that this Persian language is has been a key element within these three countries in the region. And something that was dear to Osimi as well, and he tried his best as well to encourage that when he came to Kabul in the early 1980s. And I think that was kind of a reflection, my reflection of Osimi's work, but also something that connects the region as well as that Taiwan was a connection, the organization that he established. And despite all this anti-Persian movement, the region is still these two countries speak without translators, and they understand each other. And that was kind of my reflection of this. And
Thank you very much. This very quickly, this sentiment of anti-Farsiphobia is it becomes intense in Afghanistan with the form of governance. For example, now the Taliban that have taken over from 1996 to 2001, they tried to do again away with Farsi in Afghanistan and tried to do all the government business in Pashto. Again, from 2021, then we have the Taliban. They have followed the same approach. Again, they're trying to do away with Farsi. So this anti-Farsi movement in the region, because of new nationalisms, is very strong. And that's, I mean, thank you so much for giving the kind of context that this, to make sense for people. Otherwise, it will not make much sense to you. So we're proud to have, one of our colleagues from Tajikistan, from the modern nation states, and then one from Afghanistan, and another from the modern nation state of Uzbekistan, from Samarkand. So Kamila. Let me say, Kamila Akhmedjanova, before coming to the University of Oxford, Faculty of Asian and Middle East Studies, completed her BA and MPhil degrees at the University of Oxford. Having previously specialized in Italian literature and linguistics, she also holds MSc in Oriental Studies from the University of Oxford. She took part in various academic conferences, including the most recent conference of the Association for Iranian Studies, the British Society for Middle Eastern Studies, and the Italian Association for the Study of Central Asia and the Caucasus. She published several academic articles covering topics related to the 19th century Persian-speaking intellectual trends, as well as to the methodology of teaching Tajik Persian. Her first article was dedicated to the study of double past participle. I'm blind. So, without further ado, the floor is yours. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And I think unlike two previous speakers, I'll be really concise because I'll just talk about my own personal impressions about the film. Since I'm a specialist on the 19th century, so I don't really work, I'm not a specialist on Osimi, but still I work in intellectual history, so from this point of view it was very interesting for me to watch a movie that was dedicated to a contemporary intellectual rather than something belonging to the past. I believe that in the modern day, not enough tribute is paid to people who are devoted to their cultures. Osimi was devoted to his. So his whole life, I think, can be summarized with the following words. He really fought for preservation of his own Tajik Persian culture, and all his work was dedicated to this cause. His main concern was the improvement of education in his native land, as well as the preservation of teaching of classical Persian literature, including Rudaki and Rumi, heritage that Tajiks share with the rest of the Persian-speaking world. I mean, also, this is related to what the previous speakers talked about. When we talk about the Persian intellectual and literary heritage, especially in the West, people would automatically think about Iran. But it wasn't just Iran. It's not just Iran that sort of owns this heritage. It's the whole Persian-speaking world, which consists of Iran, Central Asia, parts of South Caucasus, and parts of India as well. And Afghanistan, obviously, importantly. This is evident from both this documentary that we've just watched and from virtually all Osimi's written heritage. This deep sense of patriotism is what defines Osimi's life, in my opinion. At the same time, Osimi was free of any criticism of other cultures. As a highly educated and sophisticated man, he treated all world cultures with equal respect. He firmly believed in the ultimate shared heritage of the entire Persian-speaking world and the need for it to culturally unite, rather than dwell on individual differences. This is evident from Osimi's frequent trips to Afghanistan and his active role in establishing the Academy of Sciences, which was mentioned in this film, and of course to Iran. What I especially liked about this documentary is the personal aspect of it. Letters that Osimi wrote to his wife, his protective attitude towards his children and children of his brother, who were left orphans after his brother was killed during World War II, and whom he treated as his own children, basically. His relationship with his friends within and outside of Tajikistan. All these details add different dimensions to the description of his personality, making his figure even more relevant to the modern audience, in my opinion. This film was not based exclusively on the factual side of Osimi's biography, but instead was very human in its essence. And I think this is what makes it so nice to watch, really. Even for people who do not come from the background, from the scholarly background of Central Asian studies. My personal favorite part of this documentary is located in the very end of this film, where one of his former students recites the poem that he wrote in honor of his late teacher. Apart from the fact that the poem itself is very beautifully written, I think it can serve as a symbol that the legacy of any intellectual, and of Osimi in particular, extends well beyond his or her own lifetime. It will continue existing in the hearts of people with a similar mindset, people who share the same values and are willing to pass them on to the next generations of thinkers and scholars. People like Osimi have the power of inspiring others and will continue to do so as long as their legacy is alive. The question of the Tajik civil war that this movie touches upon is a very complicated one, as certain consequences of this war can be still felt today. In fact, it was 3 weeks ago that I went to Tajikistan for the first time in my life, and I could compare it to Uzbekistan basically, and I realized that it's the state of the country still bears the consequences of this event, which happened in the late 90s, and I think it's a shame, really. But at the same time, I mean, the fact that you can speak Tajik everywhere, just like in Samarkand, Bukhara, it's also very nice. Nevertheless, the documentary, I think, manages to give us all hope for a better future. Using inspiring quotes from Osimi's writings, the film's director manages to convey the key message of this documentary in an even more efficient way. Overall, I think this documentary should reach an audience that would be wider than purely scholars of Central Asia or people who are from that region themselves. Because usually with films about anything that relates to Central Asia, the only people who will watch it are either people who come from Central Asia themselves or who study Central Asia. Because generally an average person from the West wouldn't be interested in the region. And I think it's a mistake. It is important to understand that Central Asia is not just some remote and irrelevant region. It is actually home to some of the world's most ancient civilizations, and it's a region of immense geopolitical and cultural importance. Otherwise, there is a serious risk of misrepresenting the region, both within academia and media. First of all, when we speak about the Persian-speaking heritage, it is imperative to remember that historically this heritage belongs not only to Iran, but also, importantly, to Central Asia and other parts of the Persian-speaking world. However, it is also imperative to understand that Central Asia's intellectual life is still vibrant and it's not a thing of the past. And I think this documentary really showed it very vividly. I hope that this documentary will serve as one of the first steps undertaken to remind the wider audience of the importance of Central Asia, not just as a touristic attraction, but as a center of intellectual and cultural life which is still relevant now. Thank you.
very much.
Thank you so much, Kamila. Before we open the floor for question and answer, we're privileged to have Professor Charles Melville, who is the former chair of Persian Studies at the University of Cambridge, and Firuza, whereas she's also a scholar of well-known in Oxford and also in Cambridge. Before we open for the question and answer, I would love if they had anything to reflect on the documentary or what was said, and then we will open up for the question and answer.
Well, I could stand up, although I'm rather tall, stretch my legs. Well, I came to the film thanks to Firuza telling me about it. And of course, I've read some of these UNESCO volumes. I'm really a historian of medieval Iran, so not modern Tajikistan. But I've been on several tours with the Cambridge Alumni Travel Programme, and in fact we used to just go to Iran, and that became impossible because I was going to get arrested if I went to Iran again. So I developed a very beautiful tour going to Iran from Tashkent. We started in Tashkent and then went to Iran to start with, and then I couldn't go there anymore. But we started going to Tajikistan as well. In fact, my first visit there was to with Firuza, because her father, who's a musician and a director of the opera in Dushanbe, had died. And he went there to help deal with the flat and his belongings and see the opera house and so on. So I've been there quite a lot. So my personal take on this is relatively recent, and mainly going to Uzbekistan, but also more recently going to Tajikistan again. And the first thing that strikes me, being basically a Persianist, as you mentioned, you can speak Persian when you're trying to haggle in the madrasas in Samarkand or Bukhara if you want to buy some Suzani or something like this. And so there's a sort of Persian air about it, especially, of course, if you study the history, you can see all these magnificent Timurid monuments and so on. But it doesn't feel like Iran. As soon as you go to Tajikistan, of course, the level of economic development, I mean, various things they don't show you, it's quite so open, and certainly in recent years, Uzbekistan has really opened its borders a lot and become very accessible. You go to Tajikistan, you feel you've gone back to Iran, just for me, because I can't get to Iran, and the whole atmosphere is totally different. It's far more Persian, the restaurants are fabulous, and all the ideas of ghouls and bulbuls and things are all there. And so you do feel a very pleasant atmosphere in Tajikistan, which sort of links it to Iran. So that's just a tiny bit about my personal take. But my other part as a historian, and I agree absolutely with this, being interested in Iran and being interested in what we might call greater Iran in the old days, there's such an emphasis in Oriental studies. Of course, you've got the Far East and you've got the Middle East. It's all about Arabic, it's all about Islam. For every one Persian scholar in Britain, about 20 Arabists. And they all know long, or not know long, I mean, know about Islam, obviously, which of course I do as well. But the point is, that's one world, Arab, Islam, Levant, over there, North Africa. And then you have the Eastern Islamic world, which is totally different. And it's not treated as a block. It's not celebrated in great university departments like Arabic and Islamic studies. It is Islamic. But it's Islamic with a tinge that is Iranian, or Persian, whatever you want to call it. And these areas, which I take to be Eastern Iran, but actually the whole of Iran, Central Asia, which I take to be Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and North India, is one huge cultural mass. And the coming and going of people and ideas, literature, history, endless connections, right back to Mohenjo-Daro and all these ancient civilizations, right up to the British left. More or less what you think. So I agree with these ideas. It should be studied as a whole and not departmentalised. Whether you're talking about Samarkand and Dushanbe, of course, is one department. It should be the whole thing, actually, Eastern Iran, Western Central Asia, whatever you want to call it. The only other thing I had to comment about this, out of pure ignorance, is where Osimi got these ideas. I mean, we don't hear anything about his early life, his ambitions. Maybe he had to sort of fight to get to where he got to in society. I mean, who knows? He suddenly becomes this great intellectual, having been a soldier, having been some sort of a warrior, presumably an ambitious person. I mean, he must have carved his way out. We don't hear too much about that in this. And he obviously comes to respect other cultures and other nationalities and so on. But where did this start? I mean, was he very anti-Russian to start with, and then he ends up thinking Russian poetry is a good thing? You know, what forms, what's the formative influence on someone who goes on to do that, which is fine, we all grow up. I just thought it'd be nice to have some awareness of how much he even talked about it at home, his background, you know, that side of it. So that would be nice to have a think about. Anyway, that's enough for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this is a no place of please. Being a Tajik in this room, I need to say something nice. But I was actually, again, continuing Charles's idea that it would be really good to have more background of Asimov, as I know him from Tajikistan, where he was known as Muhammad Asimov. Because Khojand is also an ancient center of civilization. It's not just Bukhara and Samarkand, which were given to the Turkic world, right? Khojand is still a part of Tajikistan. Of course, after we had to have Dushanbe as a sort of a Monday market was turned out of the village to a capital, Khojand was still a place. And this is where people were, ambitious people were coming from the whole Kula area and Khojand. And my father... Well, exactly, Kamali Khojandi,
he was mentioning the
featuring in the
comparing
film,
to
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just that my father was coming from Khojand, and even now when I have to fill in the forms and saying, you know, when my father was born, there is no such country like that. It's not the Soviet Union, it's not Russia, it's not Tajikistan, it was Turkestan. So it's just a part of many reflections, and of course I would really love to and talking about what Kamila said. Yes, it's absolutely the case. Persian studies or Iranian, because Pashto is one of many other Iranian languages. It's not a Turkic language. And of course, Dari and Pashto will have serious contradictions among them, but still it's the part of the same world compared with what we have in the Zalmai, Iran and Turan. Although Turan, before Firuza, was a part of, was one of many other Iranian tribes. If we talk about that time when we have the Agesta, very, very ancient period. So we shouldn't really treat our subject as sort of a sect subject, right? We should attract people from outside the world to be interested in what we're doing. And all these ideas are universal. What we have in literature, love and death, and eternity. So I think I should stop because I'm sure there will be some other people who would like to say something.
Thank you very much,
Nice.
Firuza.
Thank you.
So let's have a few questions because as we, I think around 7:30-ish, 7:40-ish, dinner will be ready. And in the name of diversity, we have ordered Turkish food from the Mediterranean restaurant. So there we go.
Well, that's another thing. That's a restaurant.
Yeah.
Person 3 star, I see.
Well, yeah, so anyway, so let's get a few questions from.
Zalmai, can I just probably reflect on what Professor just said about Osimi and also a couple of things?
Let's take a question and then maybe answer first, and then also reflect. Is that okay? So we'll take it from you, Gahar.
Are you giving a question or just hear something?
Oh no, we do some question and answer, and then maybe you say the last word. Yeah? Is that okay? Yeah. You can please take a seat here. Sit down.
Thank you. It's nice.
Any questions? Any questions? No? All right, then we'll get you a word and then maybe.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Rade. Sorry, I didn't see.
No, sorry. Forgive me if I misunderstood something. This is absolutely fascinating, and what an incredible man Osimi was. And I just have a question in terms of, at the end there was, one of the brilliant quotes was sort of on support for democracy. And at the same time, he seems like he had a very sort of cosmopolitan intellectual background. There was all this footage, him in Paris and things like that. And I was wondering, it seems to me like he's very much sort of a universalist and very appreciative of sort of human heritage and sort of the shared heritage of humanity, and Central Asia's place within that. And I was wondering, sort of, what is the relationship between his sort of support for democracy, as it was mentioned in that quote, and this kind of more sort of cultural universalist perspective that he had on the world in general? But just specifically, how does that relate to democracy? Because that was a really interesting quote, which I felt like, I'd like to know more about.
Would you like to say something, respond to that? Maybe some of the speakers, other speakers might have also reflection on that.
Do you mean that they contradict each other, but they don't?
No, I don't mean they contradict each other. I just mean what is the relationship there, and what exactly was the meaning of
Well, I
that
guess
quote?
that's what you meant by democracy. I mean, this multiculturalism. That's
I think not in a kind of political term, but in terms of cultural diversity that could be used, like a sort of democratic approach, accepting and also recognizing the diversity of the region, language, culture, and traditions, but also he was someone, I think, sort of bridge builder. He was trying to connect this, and this is like something also briefly I mentioned when, as a result of British and Russian imperial rivalries, all these, communities that have, like literally, I will just give you an example. The border between modern Tajikistan and Afghanistan. We have this Amu Darya or Panj Darya locally known, and the whole Badakhshan literally divided. We have Badakhshan in Afghanistan, we have Badakhshan in Tajikistan. And we have like Wahi speaking people on Afghanistan side, we have Wahi speakers on Tajik side, we have Shugni speakers on Afghan side, we have Shugni speakers on Tajik side, and also we have like regions also like Darwoz of Afghanistan, Darwoz of Tajikistan. They didn't really care less. They just, found it probably suitable to make it easy to cut these communities. But for Muhammad Osimi, I think he was someone who knew it, who understood quite well, and also what you, Professor, mentioned. He understood the importance of these communities and connecting and the role of Persian language, because it's not just a language, it was a civilization by itself. However, during the Soviet period, it's very hard to sort of bring this argument or make something about it, but with the coming of Gorbachev and eventually leading to the collapse of the Soviet Union, he saw it as an opportunity, and he wanted to grow and bring in this community before something happens between them or the current situation in Afghanistan. So he thought that probably by revising this identity, it could have probably breach between these communities and let it sort of like go into natural development as it was probably pre-Soviet time. But there was also another aspect which is very important. Soviets, what they did, it's a kind of contradiction to their policy. They're like creating all these, countries as a nation states within the Soviet Union, and that you're allowed to, let's say, have your own language, your universities, Academy of Sciences, theater, But that identity is not complete because it has to be in line with Marxist-Leninist ideology. And if you're crossing the boundaries, you will be in trouble. And for instance, in the Soviet-Russian terminology, nationalism had a negative connotation. Nationalist is someone like chauvinist, and you will easily get in trouble. So he knew that this identity is not complete. And coming back to, sorry, I'm just going on the Persian language. Imagine what is happening. I just give this example. I think it's like easier to explain. Like in Farsi, we say that Zaboni Madari. It's like mother's tongue. Okay. Therefore, we see it as a mother. And your mother was known for thousands of years, Persian. And then suddenly, in Moscow in 1920s, they decided from now on, your mother's name would be Tajiki. Imagine how much it will affect you psychologically. But at the same time, it's destruction. It's like cutting off communities from their 1,000 years of history, culture, tradition, literature. As similarly they did in Afghanistan. Later on in 1960s, they decided to call it Dari. And Dari, there is a lot of references in literature, particularly in poetry, and some believe that it's probably taken from the court, Darbar, in court language, which probably like Urdu. But then suddenly, this is what they did. And this sort of partial identity and making easy, sort of controlling the people and their sort of...
But we're always Tajiks.
Yeah,
Way
exactly.
before anyone had heard of Tajikistan. I mean, the Turk and Tajik, I mean, all the chronicles and the thing, they're all talking.
On that, Tajik was quite a political debate as well, like a kind of a Stalinistic definition that a nation must have its own geopolitical kind of state and a language. So for that reason, so I said Tajik is somebody who is primarily Sunni Muslim and speaks Tajik language. And so that definition, of course, was not practical. It didn't work in Tajikistan because you had non-Sunni Muslims who were identifying themselves as Tajik, and there were non-Tajik speaking Muslims who were identifying themselves as Tajik. So that was who were the Tajiks. And then in Tajikistan, that definition wouldn't apply to Tajiks in Afghanistan.
Or in Uzbekistan.
Or Uzbekistan.
Questions? All right. Anyway, the dinners probably will be ready soon. But before we go to dinner, last but not least, we have the honor of having Gawhar Osimi, the chair of Osimi Foundation, who has been working tirelessly with us the past few months, along with Chris, to make our event in London and also in Cambridge possible. We would like her to say a few words as basically closing remarks of this event this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a great honor and profound pleasure to actually here at the University of Cambridge on screening documentary film about legacy and life of my cousin Muhammad Osimi. Here we see generations of Muhammad Osimi. I have a daughter, Gawhar, Firuza, my sister, Dilrabo. Second generation, grandchildren of Nozanin, Ramin, and Mehrdod. And I can call Baba also. He's from India, but he's like a great. And his great-grandfather Behzod is my grandson. So it's very, watching the documentary film about our father is very emotional and meaningful for us. But tonight I also want to give tribute to our mother, Mona Osimi, who is inspiring, driving force, Joni Shirin of my mother. Joni Shirin, it means sweet soulmate. She was always supporting him, sharing his dreams, sharing his vision. My mom was very hardworking. We had 8 children, but in our big house, as a house we had here, we showed here, we have a lot of people from different regions of Tajikistan. My father, when he was Minister of Education, he used to go to the villages. or different areas, and he talked to the student, gifted students. Brought him here in Dushanbe, our house. We stayed together. We have sisters and brothers, remember Firuza? And after some time, they were accepted in very prestigious universities in Moscow and Leningrad. And after they graduated, they come back to Tajikistan as professionals to serve our country. So my mom, yes, my father was very busy man, and I remember then, even sometimes he had not time to take lunch or dinner. My mom goes with this plate and the spoon, and one more time, feeding him, because my father was very, very busy. When we tragically lost our dearest father, we were thrown in grief. But my mom said, I don't want to see your tears of both heads. You must be proud of your father. Keep your heads up and carry on his legacy. Then she decided to move from Dushanbe to Fujian, and the library we saw here is all 4,000 books. We moved, transferred during the Civil War through the mountains and air from Dushanbe to Fujian. My mom, one by one, taking the books and manuscripts, putting the box very, very carefully, and put the same way we had in Dushanbe. So the library is in Fujian, it was the same way in Dushanbe, and she restored his books. And after that, she collected all his manuscripts and we published his books. And we met Professor Pandita, he helped us to translate it in English. Well, then, yes, she always sharing his ideas, and during the Civil War, she was always supportive of him. My father, and she said, carry on his legacy. My father's vision was, as much we invest to education and knowledge, we invest to peace, prosperity, and stability of country. So I would like to bring here one example, very short. When during Civil War, the statue of Lenin was removed, in our country it was ideological vacuum. So people believed in socialism, communism, but everything's gone, nothing. And my father in the compatriot decided to put the statue of Firuza and celebrate Shahnameh. And for 5 years, he said, start reading Shahnameh by 3 famous poets. From Afghanistan, Dagikhudo, from Iran, it was Zola, and from Tajikistan, And I remember in radio, the sound of those reading of the poetry of the people, and reminding our country, our nation, who you are, where you come from, what is your ideology as. So we have to unite, we have to be together and overcome these challenges. And Firuza said, we are told you how to about Nasparin. Bagiti das Nikigrim. Now should be Nik Watro Poidor, Hamono Kibi, Niki Wat Poidor, in one stroke in English, let goodness keep alive. Let goodness keep alive. So, and he believed in unifying power of education, culture, and heritage. So, this was his legacy. This is his vision. He lived for, fought for, and ultimately sacrificed his life. And tonight, I would like, on behalf of our family, to express our deep gratitude to, first of all, the organizer of this beautiful evening, Mr. Zalmai and Nishat, Dagikhudo, and of course Gillian Tett, she left. So all you guys, everybody is here for sharing this beautiful documentary. And of course we would like to extend our gratitude to Christopher Production and Chris Schuler and Jeff Jolie, his beautiful wife, Diana, and Elizabeth, wife of Christopher. When they started filming, doing this film, they traveled around the world, in different countries, right, bringing this film alive. And now they're in second tour, traveled again, now not only showing, screening the film, but also spreading out the legacy of Muhammad Osimi. And thank you so much for keeping his vision alive. This evening will be a special place in our heart. It's beautiful. Thank you. We would like to present to Cambridge, University of Cambridge, 2 books which published one in the United States, anything called Panic Generations. It's for the library of Julia. And this is also both books for University of Cambridge.
Thank you so much.
So, thank you very much.
Basically, it's once again, it's my pleasure to thank everyone, the speakers, as well as those. Gillian is not here, but thank you everyone for coming this evening. And before you leave, I would really like to invite you all to a dinner that we have prepared for tonight. And I think it's now that we're speaking, probably they're trying to put it on a table. So, yeah, please. Yeah, thank you.